In the season that we find ourselves in, we're all working virtually and digitally like never before. For some of us, this is a really new thing, right? I mean, you downloaded Zoom or another platform for the first time and you've been on your first few Zoom calls. For others of us, you've been doing this for quite a while. But wherever you might find yourself on that continuum, I think you would agree that this season is a challenge and an opportunity for all of us. For example, how do we not only work virtually and understand the technology, but how can we leverage it to be more productive? And how can we create a great work culture when we're not in the same building with people? How do we do that? Well, that's why I'm so excited that you're with us today, because you're going to get to learn from two experts that have been doing this for several years now. Shannon and Bryan Miles launched Belay Solutions, and Belay provides a virtual workforce for organizations around the world. But not only that, they both teach us in their great books how to create opportunities so that you can still have a great work culture, but actually you just see people on a screen. I'm such huge fans of Shannon and Bryan. They lead an amazing organization, and I'm so excited that you get to learn from them today in this new digital virtual world that we find ourselves in. Now, after this conversation, I'm going to come back and tell you about an opportunity that you have to learn from someone else who leads a multi-billion-dollar organization, and he's going to teach us how they are shifting and pivoting in the new world and in the new frontier that's ahead of us all. But before that, I'm so excited that you get to learn from Shannon and Bryan Miles. Well, today I'm with two of my favorite business leaders, Shannon and Bryan Miles. And let me just intro them by saying this. I had the privilege of speaking at a Belay event, and you two put on the SNL cheerleading costume that Will Ferrell and Cher O'Terry did. And that was one of my favorite introductions I've ever had speaking at a business event.
It was one of our finest moments as leaders.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I thought, I already love you both, but I'm like, I really like these people. So that was great. And you actually did a really good job too. So if none of this works, there's cheerleading in your future. So you all are entrepreneurs. Great. Yeah, I like that, Bryan. That's good. Maybe we'll just wrap it up with one of those.
Yeah. We'll end with a cheer.
We all need a cheer, by the way. I think we agree we all need a cheer. Now, you all are entrepreneurs. You have a pastoral heart, both of you. But you were virtual before virtual was cool. And I want you to tell us a little bit of the Belay story. For those that may not be familiar with Belay, obviously you got other interests and other companies that you're running. But one of the things we wanted to dive into today was some best virtual practices, since we're in the season. And, a lot of companies are now realizing, and Bryan, you've told me this, for months and months now, this is the way to go. A lot of companies and universities are realizing, this might be the future. So tell us, can you give us a little of the backstory of Belay?
Sure.
Yeah, Bryan and I were both working for separate organizations in 2010, which I had been working, both of us working remote, even in those old roles for years. So the concept of working remote was really nothing new for us when we decided to start Belay in 2010. Bryan was on the road constantly as a sales leader. He was traveling the country, working in church construction. I think he was on 5 to 6 flights a week. It was
much.
Unsustainable for our family. Our kids were 2 and 5 at the time. And I was working for a healthcare company and had really maxed out my growth potential there. And so we both were feeling like at an impasse, and that God was calling us to start something of our own in the spring of 2010. So we took our time that summer, formulated the corporation, and decided October 1st that we were going to give notices to our bosses on the same day. And took about 6 to 8 weeks to wrap up what we were working on, with the hopes that if this whole business venture went bust, we could go crawling back to our old jobs, our companies at least. But we did have the concept to serve initially pastors with virtual assistant services. And that is still very core to what we do today. We've expanded from there to bookkeeping and website specialists and beyond the church sector. But the initial concept is still essentially what we provide.
That's great. Shannon, I think that's a really interesting point about finishing well, because I tell leaders, you really only get one chance to finish well.
Yeah.
And don't burn those bridges. I remember when I left Chick-fil-A, I wrote everyone in the marketing department a letter that basically said, if Buckhead Church doesn't work out, can I come back here?
That's right. That's exactly what we did. Yeah. It's like, hey, this crazy idea, if this doesn't work out, we would like to have our jobs back.
Yeah. And we learned so much at those jobs. I mean, we weren't leaving because they were horrible. It was just God was prompting us to start this new thing.
Well, I think too, we have the benefit of hindsight now, but 4 to 5 years after we left those jobs, those companies dissolved. Mm-hmm. So what seemed this very stable thing actually wasn't. Mm-hmm. And, that risk that we took that felt so big actually wasn't. Mm-hmm. So, there's a time and a place for risk, a qualified risk, especially. And that's what we're telling people right now during this whole phase of the Rona is like, hey, like take a qualified risk if you can, and we certainly understand there's a lot of hardship right now. And the idea of risk for many would be very hard to consider, but there's a handful of people that they probably need to go start something right now in the midst of all this.
And risk was a real thing for both of you. If I remember correctly, you cashed out a portion of your 401k or something, right, to launch this.
All of it. Yeah. And we used that as our startup capital. So we didn't ask anybody for money, although we had friends that had money. We just wanted to do this on our own. And we've been very fortunate to see a company grow. We know that, we know the grim statistics around small business, but we've been very fortunate. God's been really kind to our business. Mm-hmm. And we've been a good steward of it. We've grown it, I think, at an appropriate clip. And it seems like that little investment at the time was felt like this giant investment.
It was everything.
Has paid off.
Yeah.
And what made you think of the virtual space?
Well, so my assistant, her name is Trisha. She worked for me at my old company. And so she lived in Charlotte and I lived in Atlanta, and it just worked. And so I saw her maybe 10 to 12 times a year, but she was a virtual assistant before it was a thing. And I just thought, and we both thought as we were doing our due diligence, plenty of leaders could use a virtual assistant, a really qualified person to come alongside them and to be an extension of who they are as a leader. And it turned out that pastors were really interested in the service early on. And then about 9 months in, a little known guy, Michael Hyatt, said nice things about us and he became a client. And then from there, we kind of opened up into 30 different verticals today. But it was just this idea that you could have qualified people. They just didn't have to be in your office.
And at the time, the prevailing model for virtual assistants was overseas. So the Philippines, Guatemala, India. And we knew that would be a barrier for a lot of people that we were looking to serve. Like they just didn't and would never see that as a solution. So what we wanted to do is take what was out there and make it more relational, more professional, and more reliable. And basically try to build the best virtual assistant firm that we could, learning about what had worked and what had not worked with other organizations.
One side note too is Trisha, while she was my assistant way back then, she actually is now the CEO of Belay. She became the Chief Executive Officer January 1st of this year for 2020. And we moved into the roles of co-chairs of our board. And she was incredibly qualified. She served as our COO for several years, but it's really cool to see, what people sometimes perceive as, well, they're just an admin. Right. The truth is they're highly gifted people and they're great leaders in a lot of instances. So, that you should be very kind to your admin assistants that are out there for anybody watching this or listening, because they will run companies one day for sure. And
a lot of our leadership team is composed of former administrative assistants. So we pride ourselves on that.
That's great. And, one of the great things is you created a category in many respects, but it's also one of the challenges because you actually had to explain this, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So here's what this is. Here's how this works. Yeah. It's not unlike Truett Cathy going, okay, we're going to put a chicken in the 2 pieces of bread. It's explaining this, right? So how did you do that because you're selling, but you're also explaining?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, once you have that chicken sandwich, you don't forget about that chicken sandwich, right? It's so good.
It's the same as true of having a really great virtual assistant. Like I liken it to, do you remember that first time you got bumped to first class for a flight? And the minute you got up there and you sat down and you had your flight experience, you're like, I'm ruined for life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true when you have a really great virtual assistant, somebody that can anticipate your needs and get ahead of you and help you in professional tasks and personal tasks. It's like, It's just a beautiful thing. So yeah, we'll be honest though. We had an uphill battle really up until March 16th of this year, explaining how this works with our sales team. So what would happen is a prospect would come in and go, okay, what does this mean? How does this work? How does this make sense for me?
How can I work with somebody who's not in the office with me?
Yeah. And now, the Rona hits and it's March 16th, 2020, and that conversation's over because everybody knows how to work from home now. And most people now are figuring out how to lead from home so that the chasm that they have to jump to get a virtual assistant is almost negligible.
And that's got to be good for your company.
It is.
Yeah. We've definitely felt the impact of it because a lot of the clients that we serve are small businesses. And so they've been impacted by this like many other business owners. So it's not that, we haven't felt the impact along with them, but I do think that as we start to come out of this and find the other side and a new normal or whatever that looks like, we will have been really well positioned to continue serving those that we already have. And then, some of our prospects that are coming in now are with organizations where their team did struggle to make the switch to work from home, but the work still needs to go on. And so I think, as we start to come out of this, we'll see a lot more momentum than we're feeling currently.
And employers are really struggling right now. So business owners and employers, they have employees telling them, hey, I really like working from home.
Yeah.
And I could see an iteration where I don't come in the office except for training or for a meeting or whatever, but I'd rather work from home. And so employers and decision makers, business owners are like, I might just abandon the office. And that conversation is happening at a rapid pace around our country, probably globally too.
And I remember, Brian, a conversation you and I had, and you're like, don't spend money on office space, and which sounded, it was a great idea, but is even more relevant to today. And now I would imagine we got two groups of people here. One might be I think we might be headed toward more of a virtual, we'll still maybe have an office, but we may try to have more of a virtual space. So I'd like to talk to those folks. There's also probably some folks watching that are thinking, Belay, you mean I could become a virtual assistant? What does that look like? So I'd like to talk to serve two of those groups of people if it's okay. The first group I'd love to talk about, give some strategies or helpful advice in terms of going forward if they're not going to go 100% virtual, but they're going to go maybe 50%. What are things they can be doing now that will help them once, to your point, Shannon, the new normal hits?
Yeah, I think right now, leveraging technologies that are already out there, like Zoom, obviously is the most popular word anybody's saying right now behind Corona, can really help bridge the gap of not being in the same physical space together. I think also if you come to meetings that are remote with the same intention that you would come to them with in the office, you can start to propel your business or your organization forward more. It's not just get on and, hey, how's everybody doing? It's like, we're coming here to work and this is just our new office. It just looks a little different. And I think too, to the extent that leaders can over communicate during the season is absolutely huge. A lot of our team members are scared right now. They don't know if they're going to have jobs. They don't know if their kids are going to go back to school in the fall. They don't know how long they're going to be able to homeschool and not ruin their kids' education. Like there's just a lot of real fears going on. And the more a leader can show up and lead through over communicating at this time, I think will give our team members a sense of the reality of what's going on, but then also hope that we're going to get through it.
Yeah, and we've tried to remind people, especially now, especially business owners, is to remind them that a building, a physical location doesn't make company culture or an organization's culture. It's actually shared vision is what creates your company's culture. And surrounding yourself around what's shared vision and encouraging organizations and leaders to point to the North Star of their organization right now, that's culture. The building is unnecessary to that. And so we've had to remind people you might have the coolest ping pong tables and break room, but that doesn't mean anything to anybody right now. It's a lot of people just want to know where we headed, boss, tell us where we're going, and that's important, I think, for, decision makers to realize right now the emphasis on pointing to the North Star versus how awesome their building might be.
And I would also, I love all this advice. One of the things for me this may be too much information. I don't know, TMI, but I've even decided, I'm not going to wear my bedroom shoes on these Zoom calls. I'm actually going to wear the shoes that I would wear to work. Yeah. Even though it's comfortable, I'm not going to wear my bedroom shoes during a Zoom call.
You're not doing the work mullet, huh?
That's right. Wendy's cutting my hair right now, just so you know.
Did a great job.
Side note, Zoom, is that the platform that it seems like everybody's using Zoom.
It's popular, right?
Platforms we should be using, or does it matter?
We always, as far as video chatting, in our opinion, we've been using Zoom since day one, since they came onto the market. Prior to that, it was GoToMeeting. I know Microsoft has a team meeting platform. Our kids are using Google Hangouts. There's no shortage of, video communication tools out there. I think you just have to find the right one that works for your organization. Another nice, practical application to use is Loom, Loom, and there's a Chrome extension for it. And you can do a screen capture and record a video in response to something, or maybe you need to explain something to your team that normally you would put on the whiteboard. That's a nice application to use when you're working remote. And then finally, we've been using Voxer for a while. I'm sure it's something that you guys, maybe. Have you heard of Voxer? Do you know this? Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like a walkie-talkie app, but basically you can message whoever and they can respond to it at their convenience. And then it has a log of your communication. So it's just cool. An aggregated platform of quick information. You can do talk and text and images or whatever. And that way you can go back and kind of scroll through. And so you don't miss anything as you would sometimes in text. So there is no shortage of, applications out there that help facilitate working remote. Yeah. And we have aggregated a lot of them at belaysolutions.com. If anybody listening, they're all free. They can go out there and find tips and resources about applications, leading from home, working from home with kids, some really relevant topics of conversation right now.
I think too, it's interesting, or it's important, I think, for anybody who would be listening or watching this to realize we're an organization of 1,100 people. So the things that we're using are enterprise level, but there's plenty of, a lot of these things can apply to businesses that are smaller, organizations that are smaller in size. Mm-hmm. But a really a super simple one that almost everybody's on is Facebook, creating a private group. And then, sharing your highs and lows and being able to communicate that way, or doing a poll about how sentiment is, how people are feeling. You can leverage a lot of freer applications that are out there. We use Salesforce as our CRM, and we use Chatter. Mm-hmm. And that's a really great way for any organizations that might use that. So, but regardless of size, there's plenty of great tools, I think, that are out there for them.
That's great. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, okay, I've never done this, but I'm going to try to share my screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the world that we're,
that's it. Yeah.
Thinking of that. So for the folks that would say, all right, maybe I've been furloughed, or maybe I've been downsized, but I've obviously been in the business space. I've never heard of Belay, but now I do. What they're interesting in maybe, being in part of this world. What advice would you give them?
I'll go. I will tell you that in this exact moment right now, we are pausing on looking for folks because we have plenty of people. For perspective, before this hit, we were getting about 2,000 resumes a month that our talent acquisition team is, going through and so forth. And that has spiked. And we decided that, hey, we need to make sure our existing team is taken care of through this. However, there's a season coming shortly where we will be back online looking for great people. And our heart has always been to target college educated, stay-at-home moms and dads with past business and professional experience, and kids of aging parents, because those groups of people have always been marginalized by corporate America. And they're great people, they're highly talented, and we've always kind of targeted those folks. But now it's in addition to, so we know there's really great talent that unfortunately has been furloughed. So we'll be looking through those as well to just see who's qualified to join our team. And it's sooner than, we'll probably be online much sooner than a lot of other employers, because we're fortunately now kind of have found our bottom, which wasn't terribly significant. And we're on the upswing with our business right now. So it won't be too long before we'll be looking for more folks.
I would say if they follow along, on Belay's social media, we'll start to announce again when we're ready to bring on new team members.
Great. And one of the many reasons I love following y'all is you're not only, owning Belay, but you've started 2 other organizations, and probably started organizations I'm not even aware of quite yet. But you tell us, I would love for you to talk about the brewery, and also ownnotrun.com, because I think this is allowing you to continue to stay sharp, because you go from a huge company at Belay to now a small company that has actually different challenges. One's just starting up, and one has started up, and all this kind of stuff. So what are you learning in the other 2? And tell us a little bit about those.
Sure.
Yeah, so this is our 10th year of having Belay. And we knew, as Bryan mentioned earlier, as we were migrating to have Trisha become the CEO, effectively replacing us in that role, we needed other things to, spend our time and attention on. So the first new thing that we started with our business partner, Joe Garcia, was Nofo Brew Co. that just opened in September of 19. So we haven't even been open that long. And then all of this hits, and it's in North Forsyth, thus Nofo. It's a craft brewery, and it has been remarkable to see the community turn out to support a new business and enjoy some great beer. And I love that we're talking about it on this particular podcast. I just think that's fantastic. So even if you're in Gwinnett, come on over. We had to close the doors, just like a lot of organizations, and had to figure out a creative way to still get the beer out. So we've been selling crowlers online. People just drive up and pick them up. But we've been very fortunate to keep our team there. They were just coming online with us. Many of them have had such a great experience at Nofo that they left their other jobs to be with us full time. So we decided that we would prioritize keeping them on the team and, forego a lot of other things because they're amazing and we value them so much, and we could do that. So we're excited to get them back to work as soon as the state, begins to open up. And it looks like this Friday will be our first day in limited opening that we can have people back in the tap room.
Yeah. And our other business is Own Not Run. And Shannon and I have always had a heart to help other business owners. And we've always kind of carried this mantra in our business that we wanted to own our company, not run our company. Mm-hmm. And we have a pretty simple definition for that, is that when the business doesn't need you day to day is the day that you become the owner of a company. Until then, you run a company. So we've worked really hard over the course of time with Belay, and now with our brewery, and now with Own Not Run, that find great people, resource them, and equip them so that they can basically run the company, so that we can be strategic and be really good business owners. And a lot of business owners, they are happy doing the running side of things, and they have zero interest in becoming just the owner. For us, there's maximum freedom in that, so that we can help other business owners. So Own Not Run is a place where business owners can come and realize kind of where they are on the spectrum of ownership, but then also we're going to give them content that helps them kind of move to the next stage, ultimately so that they can own their companies and enjoy the freedom connected to it. But right now, not a lot of business owners are enjoying freedom of anything.
We're trying to keep the lights on.
Yeah, so we've had to pivot too, and we've changed our conversation and tone just to make sure that we're helping them where they are right now, because we're kind of in the same thing. We're learning from business owners just as much as they would be from us.
Mm-hmm. And is there one piece of advice that you're giving them now that you could share with us in terms of how to go forward, I guess, or how to pivot?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's 2. It's a really simple one, is to give grace to your teams right now, to extend grace as much as humanly possible, because you need it too as a business owner. Mm-hmm. Default to grace in this season, and really hopefully forever, but it's important to do that. And then the second thing I would say is, if you have the ability to step on the gas, do it. Yep. As a business owner. If you've got cash and you can do a thing that would help, build your moat. If Warren Buffett were here, he'd say that, same thing is like, build your moat, make your organization that much stronger or more viable or bigger, or go after a competitor. Whatever that thing is, it could be a $500 thing. It could be a $1 million thing, depending on the size of the organization. But right now is the opportunity to step on the gas, because everybody is retracting. And this is an opportunity for the smart business owners to get after it and to go after it harder.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Now, one of the things I'm telling folks too is this is a great time to be reading. Both of you've written a great book. So Shannon, tell us about your book, and Bryan, I'd love for you to tell us about your book.
Yeah, my book is called The Third Option. It's why a woman doesn't have to choose between her career and family, but can have both and succeed. And it just essentially tells my story of how I was able to craft a part-time position where I didn't have to give up what I love doing professionally to start, also being a mom. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of women and men even right now struggle with having to make that choice. So it's a lot of encouragement of not only my story, but other people's stories of how they've been able to blend the two. And then Brian's book.
Yeah, I have it here because I have talked about it so many times.
It's very relevant right now.
Turns out my book is selling better now than when it launched in 2018.
Which is Virtual Culture.
Virtual Culture, the way we work, doesn't work anymore. And it's basically our playbook for how we created an all virtual company. We've never had an office ever in the history of Belay. We've grown it to 1,100 people. And a few years ago, we won an award with Entrepreneur Magazine for top company culture. And we did that stacked up against every other company that had an office. So we got some notoriety from that. Like, how did you do that without an office? Like, is an office critically important to culture? And so we just said, hey, here's our playbook and how we did that. And there's some very practical things in there in terms of, managing meetings and building culture and, some challenging things to think about. My last chapter, the conclusion is called Workplace Apocalypse. And I think we're in the midst of it right now.
It came out in 2018. So this is not like, released this spring.
But I knew that the workplace was changing. It's accelerated because of this whole mess. But I think that, organizational leaders and owners really need to start thinking through what office space is going to look like in its next iteration for a business, because for it to sustain itself, you have probably the biggest mounting tension coming your way, which is a tsunami of people that insist on working from home. Mm-hmm. And there's a season ahead when maybe unemployment irons out, where their best talent will refuse to come work for you unless they have the opportunity to work from home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you both are like Old Testament prophets.
I never would have wanted to prophesy this.
I got the beard.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. This was coming. Well, first of all, I have one final question. I'll let you think about this because I didn't send you this ahead of time. But what's one thing that you're doing personally right now to stay motivated in this season? While you're thinking about that, I just want to say thank you for what you both are doing. No offense to people like me in terms of pastors, but I really do believe one of the ways that God is going to use or to reach people. I believe in the church. I believe in pastors. I are one. So not trying to be critical of people like me, but I really do think the business space is such fertile ground for the kingdom. And so I think you're showing people that you can be great business people. You can also be believers, and you're leading that on the forefront. So kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you.
So Shannon, what's one thing that you're trying to do in this season to stay motivated, I guess?
As much as possible, I'm not setting my alarm, which is the weirdest thing ever to do. But when I get up, I have my couple cups of coffee and some quiet time in the morning, and then I work out, whether I feel like it or not. It could just be stretching, but at least it's some type of physical activity, because otherwise I think I would turn into a complete and total sloth, because that's where my mind wants to go right now. So forcing myself to be physically active some way, shape, or form every day.
That's great. Brian?
Mine's less motivating, but I would tell you this. So I lost a really close personal friend of mine back in November who was my age. And I really struggled with processing his death. He's a believer, and, I know where he's at, and that's all good. And then, my mentor, Reggie Campbell, I was really close to, and he passed. And death has been on my mind. And so I've been reading a book called Imagine Heaven. Mm-hmm. And for me personally, that has been very motivating because, not knowing what's on the other side and then reading the accounts that are rather consistent with what happens when a person that believes in Jesus dies, it's really fascinating. So that to me personally has been really good for my soul. Mm-hmm. And it's brought me to tears a couple of times over because, I lost my dad when I was younger, and, I've felt some emotion pulling up from that. So this has been a really kind of a cool time for me, just drawing close to God in a new way that was unexpected. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's probably it for me.
Well, you don't need me to tell you this. I'll put on my pastor's hat, but that's really wise. As you both well know, unprocessed grief shows up in negative emotions, and it typically shows up among the people that we are closest to. So, and then we're all confined right now. So
take it away.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for doing this. Thank you for your time. I'm huge fans. Thanks for your friendship to me and to Gwinnett Church. And I hope to see you again in person.
Yes.
But if not, hey, we're a virtual culture. We'll do this.
We're grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Virtual hugs.
Yes.
I certainly hope you found this helpful. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this. We want to reach out to amazing leaders like Shannon and Bryan and say, hey, can you help our community in this season? And so I would highly encourage you to get Shannon's book, highly encourage you to get Bryan's book, because they will help you in this season. And what we want to do as we move forward is we're believing that we're going to get through this, as challenging as these days are, we're going to get through this better and stronger together. And we are genuinely and authentically for you. And that's again why we're reaching out to people like Shannon and Bryan. It's why we're creating our next Gwinnett County Digital Business Breakfast with one of my best friends and one of the best leaders I know. David Farmer is the Senior Vice President of Restaurant Experience for Chick-fil-A. I've known David for well over 20 years. He's, as I mentioned, one of my best friends. But David is an incredibly sharp leader, so much so that Chick-fil-A recently asked him to help them lead through the re-entry process as they begin that journey and begin to open up many stores that were closed down and trying to figure out all of the details that they got to figure out. And as he's been doing this, he came on a Zoom call, by the way, Bryan and Shannon, if you're still watching this, he came on a Zoom call with our staff, and he shared 3 principles that he's leaning into to help Chick-fil-A in the re-entry process. Our team found this so helpful. They had the great idea of, let's invite David to a Gwinnett County Digital Business Breakfast. So we're going to do that, and you're going to be able to learn from David and the 3 principles that he's going to be offering or leading Chick-fil-A in during their re-entry process. The only thing that we're asking you to do is to register for the event. And you can do that by going to gcbusinessbreakfast.com. gcbusinessbreakfast.com. The cost is absolutely free. So we look forward to seeing you there. Again, we hope all of this is helpful for you. And again, the reason we're doing this is we're for you, and we're going to get through this better and stronger together.